Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. So I'm Megan Marino. I'm the Water Conservation Specialist here for the Alameda County Water District. Just to give you like a rundown of what's going to happen, I'll briefly go over some housekeeping items, talk a little bit about Alameda County Water District, introduce our speaker. He'll speak for about an hour and 15 minutes, and we'll pause for the refreshments, and then we'll come back and finish with some hands-on, get your fingers in the soil here, or compost. And so as far as housekeeping items, there's our Wi-Fi password. The restrooms are out the door and to the left. Make sure you sign in if you haven't already. It sounds like, did everyone sign in? Awesome. Unfortunately, there's no food or drink in here. Water's okay, but be mindful of that, especially during the break. And speaking of compost, we're trying to make these events more eco-friendly, so all of our materials have been compost, and so please be careful to put it in the right bin. And if you did bring your own mug, you'll get a little gift from us, like a seed packet of California poppies. So if you didn't bring them today, please be sure to do that next workshop, just to reduce some of the waste. We have an evaluation at the end, and we'll be having a raffle. We'll be raffling off these two guides, one for soil and one from a bay-friendly source. So there's 8 prizes. In the back we have our materials, and actually when we started planning this event, it was interesting. We had a lot of interest, like not only from participants but from other agencies. So Stop Waste and City of Fremont both wanted to collaborate, and they have their materials here for us today. So there may be future events where we all team up and make this a little bigger, but for now they just provided materials. So it was really cool and an awesome chance to get some of their information out. If you're not familiar, we have a demonstration garden outside. It's beautiful right now. Everything's blooming with all this rain and springtime. So we have a section for residential and for commercial uses, so it's really good to get out there and like see the plants for themselves before you plant them and get inspired with ideas, because everything's low water use and water efficient. So there's some really, hopefully it's not raining and you can go out there and check it out. Please silent your cell phones. And for upcoming events, it's kind of past the Earth Day and stuff like that, but for things I wanted to highlight, we have a bill credit for low-income people, which can get $25 off their bill. So we want to encourage that. And then we just switched over to electronic billing. So how many of you guys are ACWD customers? Nice. How many of you guys have been to a workshop before? Okay. So I'll try and make these slides really quick since a lot of you guys have already been here. But we'll go into them now. Our mission is to provide a reliable source of high-quality water at a reasonable price. We have 84,000 connections. This is our service areas: Union City, Fremont, and Newark. We have 3 sources of supply. 40% comes from the State Water Project, 40% from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, which gets it from Hetch Hetchy, and then 20% of that is from San Francisco, and then another 40% from the Alameda Creek watershed, which is also groundwater. We're partnering. So this is some of our programs, and one thing I wanted to highlight is the California Youth Energy Services Greenhouse Calls. This program was actually supposed to be canceled this year. We've had 10 years running, partnering with them. We're gonna, since PG&E had a lot of changes, they were at risk of canceling it, so this might be the last year you can get it. You can call and sign up for a greenhouse call, and these youth specialists come in and fix your light bulbs, change your faucet aerators and shower heads, all for free, and you can get an energy and water upgrade at your house. So if you have questions about that, stop me at the break. We're partnering with Bosca, which also has a similar goal to have high quality supply at a fair price. And today we hope that you discover how to improve water efficiency in your garden by fixing the soil, and learn how to amend the soil with compost and mulch so you can conserve water by maximizing the water holding capacity. Just a disclaimer, this is not supposed to be an exhaustive view on the subject, so not everything is endorsed by ACWD and Bosca. If you have questions, please stop us at the break. We have 2 volunteers, Melissa and Haley, who you might have met coming in, so you're welcome to ask anything, direct questions to us. And without further ado, I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today, Ron Alexander, coming all the way from the East Coast. So we're lucky to have him. He's a horticulturist. I'll just read his bio for you. It's quite impressive. He's the president of Ron Alexander Associates, Inc., and a consulting company specializing in product development of organic recycled products. He has almost 35 years of experience working with compost and organic recycled products. Early in his career, Mr. Alexander was the vice president of marketing for one of the first compost brokerage firms. And since becoming a consultant, he has authored The Field Guide to Compost Use, AASHTO Specifications for Compost Use and Erosion Control, and Landscape Architecture Specifications for Compost Utilization. Mr. Alexander was also the co-manager of the U.S. Composting Council Seal of Testing Assurance Program, National Compost Testing Program, and is the author of many state and national compost applications. So please join me in welcoming Ron Alexander.
I hope everybody is having an, oh, maybe I should put the thing, oh. I've only done this 500 times, so I forgot to put the, hit the button. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Usually, they don't even give me one of these. My voice is so booming. You know, it's from growing up in Philly and yelling at people, right? But it's really nice to be here. I do a lot of work in California. I have projects in the Bay Area where I work with landscape architects and engineers to specify recycled products, using recycled products, showing them a new way of doing things. And I am a horticulturist by training, as is my wife. You'll see some great pictures of my wife. You'll notice she does all the work. I have some great pictures of using compost in the landscape. I appreciate the sponsors here for the hosting the event, and then I have sponsors, these 4 organizations on the top, fund projects I'm on to do educational work. So here's some of the things we're going to talk about. If I talk too fast, you know, you better throw something at me because it's hard to slow me down, frankly. But you can do it if I blow your mind on something, stop me and ask a question. But we'll have a break in between, like halfway through, for people to ask questions. But if you have a really burning question, if it's not burning, I will ridicule you. All right? I have kids. I have kids for a long time. I'm good at it. All right? So, as we probably know here, there's a lot of government entities now who are really, really interested in compost use and interested in mulch use, and it's because we have a big issue with reducing water usage. Big issue. I find it fascinating. It's going to be something that is nationwide at some point in time, and obviously here in California, it's really, really critical. So there are a lot of different initiatives going on, both in horticulture and even agriculture, to conserve water, and these brown products are just pretty good tools to what we want to do. So here's the way it is sometimes when we're out there landscaping. These are larger pictures, but you know, we're very, very often landscaping in what is called topsoil, but what we have is not topsoil. Lots of times the topsoil is scraped away before we even buy the home, and sometimes they bring new soil in. But there really isn't any legislation around quality of soil products, so you really never know what you're getting. So what we found out is that there are a lot of people who get new landscapes, and the trees and shrubs fail because the soil is so bad, and it's really kind of a ripoff for new homeowners. You know, they should really, when you buy a new home, they should really be fixing the soil to make sure that your lawn and your trees live. But it's not the way it is. So we're going to be dealing constantly with problematic sites. Around this area, we're going to have very, very dense soils that don't like to accept water very much, right? We have a lot of what they call runoff. And I'm a firm believer, one of the things we can do as it's tougher to do things outside with climate change is that the one thing we can affect is the soil. And getting more carbon in the soil to not only hold more water but accept more water when we get big rainstorms. And this is the one thing we can do to kind of reduce the extremes for the plant. So the idea of creating a more sustainable landscape is key to keeping the plants alive. So You know, we have a lot of the soils around this area are very, very fine, so the biggest problem we have growing stuff is compaction. So, right, so, and that stops water from being accepted. It actually physically helps, slows plant roots from growing, believe it or not. The denser, yes, sir.
This is the burning compaction.
Well, I just went for 5 minutes. There's no way it was that burning in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Go ahead. Give me your compaction.
What is the main thing if you had compaction in soil you could do for it?
Oh, I'm going to show you that.
Oh, okay.
That's easy.
Okay.
That's really, really easy, and I'll show you the interesting aspect of it, because I even have some numbers to show you on some research that I did. But oh no, we can solve this issue. We can solve that very, very easily by getting organic matter into the soil. We used to think years ago that, well, you got this sort of fine soil, add sand to it. What is sand and fine material made into? Bricks.
Clay.
Bricks. So actually, small amounts of sand in fine soil has the opposite effect. You get better reduction of compaction with organic matter. So, we'll talk about that, but moisture holding capacity is key and helping those plants grow. So I like to show this picture. Listen, we're talking about a lot about backyards today. So this is a project that I was involved with in Scotland. That was a mining site on top that we built a championship golf course. The project was signed. The PGA actually designed it from the U.S., and that project was not going to happen because they were going to have to import over 300,000 tons of topsoil just to build the fairways, and it was going to break the bank of the project. So we figured out a way to screen the soil. We actually crushed some stuff, and they had a new composting industry. This was about 10 years ago, and we manufactured the soils on site and saved that project, and that golf course is up and running. So we'll talk some more about that. But we've been doing this now, this manufacturing of topsoil, which is a misnomer, but creating these landscape-based soils. We've been doing this since the 80s with fantastic success. So I'll show you some more about that. The interesting thing about fixing soils, I talk about sustainable soils and things like that. There are national and international trends with green building and green infrastructure, and all the national landscaping groups and architecture groups are all looking at ways to fix soils and do things in a greener way for long-term sustainability. And here, you'll have a program that used to be called Bay Friendly Landscapes. You guys may have heard it. It's now called Rescape. But you also, in this state, there's actually an ordinance in effect now. So you guys legally, especially on larger projects and new projects, are supposed to be creating water-efficient landscapes. And that's a state law now, believe it or not. It only affects homeowners if you're creating a new landscape, or if you're redoing a really big, over 2,500 square feet. So in most cases, it's not something that you're going to have to worry about, but it is key. It is key to keep one thing in mind. This whole program actually creates a water budget for your property, for the use of water. One of the reasons why compost and mulch is actually required to be used is because we know if we fix the soil, you got to keep those plants alive in water, but you will water less if you use compost and mulch in the process. So, but there's a lot of information. I think there's some information in the back about WELO. But these trends are national trends. Even the U.S. Department of Ag is promoting soil health for agricultural applications, for food, the ability to grow food. You know, we look at 2040, I think is the magic number. We're talking about 9 or 10 billion people on the planet. By the way, I don't expect to be here. All right? So good luck, all you young people, with this. All right? But they're probably not going to let you eat red meat anymore either by then. But the point is, the U.S. Department of Ag is promoting soil health to grow more food, and with the understanding that getting carbon in the soil actually slows the impact of climate change. Organic matter in the soil extracts CO2 from the air. Okay? Aside from the fact, by working the soil, we can ameliorate some of the water effects. Okay, so there's a common understanding of there are pragmatic steps we can do. I find what's interesting about getting organic matter in the ground, stabilized organic matter ground to help climate change. Most people are going to do it because their plants won't die. I mean, that's one of the things we found out. There's a reason to do that. You'll water less, your plants won't die. So my wife is also a horticulturist like me, and when we bought this house we live in North Carolina, does anybody know what a Japanese maple is? Okay, how about the dissectum, which is the one that kind of flows and has a really magnificent leaf? So that was the first $200 tree I ever bought. And we bought a crappy one. And that thing now is so magnificent. But the point is, I remember saying to my wife, I never in my life thought I was going to buy a tree that expensive. But the point is, my comment to her is, this tree better not die. And we fixed that soil. We made sure that tree didn't die. But the point is, that's the real reason we're fixing the soil. All the other benefits of using less water, climate change, these are the after effects. We want to keep our landscapes alive. So this brown stuff that's being produced everywhere, when I first came out of college in the mid-'80s, and by the way, the reason I look so good at my advanced age is because I rub compost on myself every now and then. I get assistance from my wife. It's more information than you need to know. But the composting industry in California has grown and grown and grown. And the permitted sites in the states, very interesting because they're required to test the compost every 5,000 cubic yards they produce. So in this state, compost, if you buy from a licensed site, the compost is tested the most rigorously than probably anywhere in the country, which is a great thing. You know what you're getting when you do it. Okay? So this is a definition of compost. It's not really a good definition, but I just want to show you something here. And the point of this, does this have a little? All right, I'm going to grab all right. Again, you'd think I was prepared. I've been up since 3 o'clock this morning, right? East Coast time. Right. So there is a lower temperature phase where there's an awful lot of fungi involved with it, and within composting, and there's a thermophilic phase, a high temperature phase. And that high temperature phase is where we get these pasteurization temperatures. So when we compost, we kill plant pests and weed seeds. So I just want to show you something here, and that's one of the reasons why we test, is to prove we have a good compost. And I'm going to walk, I took some pictures of a composting facility to show you because you may never have seen it before, but I started this national testing program for our national organization, and starting back in 2000. And pretty much all the biggest composters in the state of California are in this program. The nice part about the program is it makes everybody test for the same different things, different characteristics, using the same test method. So just like in any certification program, everybody's being compared to on an equal playing field, and it's easier for people who are buying product to get what they want, buy what they need. And so they test on an ongoing basis. If you ask for test data, they give you that test data, and they're supposed to give you technical advice on how to use the product. And Caltrans was one of the first big organizations to sign on to this project. I worked with them many, many years ago to get this going. I wrote their landscape specs for compost, for different compost uses. And to sell compost to Caltrans, you have to be in a national certification program because they can go back and look at the consistency of the products that they're using. So the program works great. These are the types of things they test for. I won't go over these in details, or you people will pass out. It's really good stuff, but it's not something we have time to go over in detail. And there's different forms this data is available. And so when somebody wants me to look at a compost and figure out the best use for it, I can look at some of this detailed data and figure out what it's good for, what it's not good for. And there's already lots of big specs out there, so if you're looking for a compost and you want to know what kind of compost do I buy, Rescape has a spec for compost that you can get your hands on. I help write that spec. Rescape, who knows about OMRI? Has anybody heard of OMRI? Okay, Organic Materials Review Institute. That means it's the products, if you get that seal, they're usable for organic, on organic crops. But the Bay Friendly, or what is Rescape now, they require organic products to be used too. So that's an added layer of eyes on the product. And then Caltrans has a series of specifications, and they have 3 different main specifications based on the sizing, the screening of the product, and the different screen sizes of the product show where you can use the material. And after we have our break, we go through this stuff. We go through our brief. We'll play around with some of these products. All right? We'll look at some of the things from the spec. So the one thing I just want to tell you about composting, because if you're ever on Jeopardy and you win, I'll want to cut, right? But composting is a surface area phenomenon. So what does that mean? We get a big piece of wood, right? So if you bury a big piece of wood in the soil, a year from now, how different is that going to be in the soil?
Not much.
Not much. If I grind that up into wood chips or sawdust and I leave it in the ground, is it going to be totally different?
Yes.
Totally different. Because microbes don't have mouths. They live on films of water, and they have all these little reactions, and they start breaking down that cellulose, the carbon, from the outside in. So compost, to get started in a composting, I'm jumping in and do it too fast. I just want to show you a couple things. Big facilities, small facilities, there are facilities that are 50 acres. There are some that are, there's one in Southern California that I think is 5 acres undercover in a building. It was expensive. It was very expensive to build. But the point is, you can make just as good compost outside. Well, here's an indoor one too. This is from back east. This is a facility that I used to work with in my hometown of Philadelphia that actually, all this over here, actually instead of turning the piles, which everybody sees, they actually blow air through the piles to make sure they're keeping. The composting process is aerobic. The microbes need oxygen. So so somebody brings the material in and they dump it onto an area. Typically there's somebody there watching it to make sure there's not garbage in with it, right? And they pull it out, right? They grind it up. If there is maybe food waste that's going to be introduced to it, because you guys are going to be the biggest food waste composters, you probably already are in the country, and you'll grind it and then you'll mix it together, right? And then they'll put it in the facility. The whole idea in a facility is to put it in one spot and have it work around and come out the back end. But you do a high temperature phase and a low temperature phase. Here's one where there's windrows and there's actually sacks, big sacks, plastic sacks you put compost in too, okay? But there's a big old facility. Most facilities you turn, these windrow turners are huge. They're huge. You have to climb up a ladder to get in them, some of these giant ones. I just wanted to show you this because these commercial composting facilities that we have in the state, millions and millions of dollars of equipment because they're handling big mass, a lot of mass. And so when I started in the industry, there were 10 or 20 of these facilities in the whole country. We have probably approaching 5,000 facilities now in the U.S.
Does the government pay for them?
Some are government, a lot of government, and a lot are private today. A lot of them. So it's a combination of both. But and there are great ones that are public and great ones that are private. Yeah. And of course they're all different sizes, right? So they're all turning, right? So they're turning these piles, and we used to say, well, we're turning these piles to oxygenate them, right? But today, what we realize, what we're really doing is we're fluffing it up. We're actually fluffing it up. So when the warm air rises, it actually brings, just like in a chimney. You know, you have convection where warm air brings air movement. The same thing's happening in those piles. So we're fluffing these piles up so we can get air movement. And this one over here, I just wanted to show you. This is a system. There's lots of different types of systems, patented systems. This one, you put the pile in that sack, and then there's an aeration pipe going through it, and they actually aerate it. It's crazy, right? This is my reminder to tell you that it is an aerobic process. Actually, if you have a composting facility and the piles get too wet and it goes anaerobic, that's when you have big odor problems at these sites. So it's very important for us to keep these oxygenated, and in the early phases, a whole lot of oxygen is used. And as the piles shrink and a lot of the food is eaten by the microbes, a lot less fresh food is available, and actually the oxygen needs go down. It's a totally natural system. You know, all we're doing is throwing some engineering principles at natural systems to get this going. Okay, we're gonna test it for temperatures. The magic number is 131 degrees. That temperature is what basically wipes out plant diseases, human diseases, animal diseases. And kills weed seeds. I love showing this picture. See that guy right there? He's German. That's why he's wearing a raincoat when he's taking temperatures. You don't even find that funny. I've traveled the world. There are certain countries where people are more uptight than other places. So I'm just suggesting, okay? Uptight. All right. Whatever. Right. High temperature phase, right? The piles shrink 40 to 50% by volume from start to finish. Okay, and then we go. A lot of the bacteria go after the nitrogenous waste materials, and then the piles shrink. High temperatures, and then the fungi start moving in, and they're really good at breaking down the hard carbon, the difficult carbon, and the piles continue to shrink, and temperatures drop in the piles. Okay, and this is. They are, this is going to be my 50-cent word for the day. They're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. Okay? So they get in there, but I'll tell you the trick of the industry is when we screen compost at the end of a process, it's typically been a best management practice to take maybe 10% of the coarse wood and you throw it back in the beginning of the pile. And it reseeds the organic matter with the microbes. Now, they're there anyway, but this just jump-starts it. So that means the piles may get to 131 in 2 days by doing that. Right? So it's just like diseases and things, they're all around them. They have to have you have to have enough things going on to make magic occur.
What's the time frame in which these big ones turn over the compost?
Right. You mean the turners? When do they do that?
Yeah, how often? Every hour or?
Oh, that's a great, everybody heard that, right? So actually, if you have, the USDA did research on this in the very early days, and they want you to turn it 5 times within a 21-day period. And basically what that does is make sure the outside stuff is put in the inside for 3 days to get the high temperatures to pasteurize it. Right? Now, if you have a pile, other piles don't have to be turned. And the process could take anywhere from 3 months to 6 months, depending on how hard you're pushing it. Yes, ma'am.
So for home use,
Yep.
with the various compost machines or boxes that you have, what are you recommending?
You mean the backyard compost? So we may have to come back to that, and I'll tell you why. We can talk about that a little bit later on, basically. It is very hard to get a backyard composting system to get hot, right? Mm-hmm. So I sometimes joke with people just to be annoying, because I do that, and say, is it really composting per se, or are we just doing degradation in a box? And so I'll tell you what I mean by that is, the stuff that's been happening in the forest forever, organic matter breaking down, is biologic degradation. When we use engineering principles and make big, big piles, the piles self-insulate. And by having the mass there, the temperatures are able to go up. So for the biggest problem we have with backyard composting is that we don't water the compost. That's the thing that always slows the process down. And then you kind of have to turn it, which a lot of people don't like to do. But they're the biggest issues, is turning the pile and making sure they're moisturized. But you know what's funny? Back in the early days, people used to say, well, the best compost I ever used was the stuff I made in my backyard. It is not said anymore. We're so much better at composting now than we were when I started. We were dumb. We were dumb, and we made lots of mistakes and made bad compost. And the industry is about 40 years old, and we're just so much better at it now. So I tell people all the time, if I was backyard composting, if you don't want to hold it for a long, long time to make really fine-looking material like that, then what I have people do, what I used to do in my old home, is we used to take the stuff we made and we used that for mulching. And then we bought compost to go in the soil because it was just more time efficient to do it that way. But you make a fantastic natural mulch out of these materials too. So, and there's lots of different feedstocks. You know, the most popular composts here are going to be from yard trimmings, but you're already the biggest food composting state. How many people have to separate their food yet? Here, yeah. So remember this, you're not good Americans if you put trash in that bin. Not good Americans. No garbage in those bins. The biggest problem we have in our industry right now, literally in our whole industry, is contamination. And we have to compost food. So that food is very high in moisture and high in nitrogen. When that goes into a landfill and they cover it up and there's no air, it generates a lot of methane, right? Woody materials don't create much methane, so this stuff has to come out. And all of Europe has done it. It has to happen for climate change reasons. A lot of methane is created in landfills. So the point is, the biggest thing holding back our industry is when we introduce food, we sometimes get inert contamination. And then you all don't want to buy the compost because it's got little flakes of stuff in it. It's the biggest challenge we have in our industry. Yes, sir.
The question is, manure or food that will make it?
Manure. Manure typically has a lot more. Manure and biosolids. Who knows what biosolids is? Yes, sir.
That's processed manure.
That's people poop. That's people poop. We used to call it sludge, but there are now ways you extra process it, and it meets special criteria, and you can compost it and make beautiful compost out of it. Believe it or not. So yes, sir.
They're not worried about like hookworm?
Hookworm. Well, I have a hookworm right now, but no. The original. So here's a very interesting. This is how old I am. Okay, so back in the early days, all of the original research on composting temperatures was done by with the USDA scientists working with the US EPA. Okay, and they figured out what they call a time and temperature relationship. They invented this understanding, this time and temperature relationship of composting. It was invented for biosolids. Long before yard waste and everything else. Do you know why? Because most of our cities on the two coasts, I shouldn't say most, a lot of them were pumping sludge into the ocean. That's how they got rid of it. The Clean Water Act, which certain governments want to try to defund, which is craziness, the Clean Water Act, working with the EPA, said we have to clean up that stuff that was considered toxic so we can create land-based uses for it. It's used in agriculture now. We've gotten the heavy metals out of it, and it was all through clean water money that we basically have improved that material. We weren't here to talk about human poop today, by the way.
They're putting that in when they raise our food, they're using that to put in the soil?
Usually this is used in where they're growing grain crops for animal feed typically. But the stuff is, I have to tell you, we have to stop this because it'll go on forever. But this stuff is, it ain't sexy, but it's safe. I mean, I'm just saying, it really is. It's actually an incredible recycling story that nobody talks about because people are afraid of this stuff. And I get why, but so the cleaner materials that we use in most of the composting around the country, most composting facilities are yard trimmings, right? Okay. And remember this, so somebody asked, which has the most nitrogen in it. So based on what you want to do, you can choose a compost that's made out of a different feedstock, right? You know, if I'm going to grow natives, I actually want yard trimmings compost. Natives don't like a lot of nitrogen, so I use yard trimmings compost. It's got less nutrients, and it's actually better for establishing natives. If I was doing a food garden, you know how much we got to fertilize, these, I would probably use something with a higher nutrient content, innate nutrient content. The interesting thing about the nutrients in compost is they come out very, very slow. They're attached to the organic matter, so the microbes have to chew on it a little bit to release it to the plant. The whole natural thing going on there. Okay? So there's compost. We put compost in the soil to fix the soil. We test soil. This is one of the things in my industry, the landscaping industry, we don't do enough of. So if you have a home renovation project and somebody's going to come in and put in new plants and fix the soil, you should have them test the soil to figure out what's going on in the soil so they can prescribe remedies and then help you choose the correct plants. All right? A lot of the characteristics of the soil drive what you can grow in it. Okay? And by the way, I'm going to provide this in PDF form, so if anybody wants this, they can just ask and they'll email it to you. Okay? If you guys want this stuff. You guys may be so tired of me, you say, I want to forget about this, right? So, a lot of state universities, all the state universities used to do soil testing. A lot of them got out of the business, but you can get soil testing done by a lot of private labs. And if you tell people like you want to do something like a bay-friendly thing or a water-efficient landscape projects, a lot of the labs are prepared for this now, and they'll do special testing to basically help you or whoever's doing your landscaping for those types of projects. And the key aspect here is they give proper explanations of what the test data means and what you got to do to fix the soil. And so here's an example right here where we got one of these main labs over here, Waypoint Lab. This is a professional lab. But if you say, hey, I'm doing a bay-friendly landscape or a water-efficient landscape, they give special information on the data the data sheets you get back.
What's the cost for that?
Oh, what is the cost of regular soil testing now, Veto? Do you have any idea what it costs for Waypoint just to do a soil test?
Yeah, it'll be around $80 for a full package,
Yeah.
but you can get individual tests for $10, $15.
Yeah. Used to be that the universities used to do it, and if you lived in that state, it was $10. They all went broke. And they said, we don't want to do this anymore. So a lot of the states go outside. But the key is, if you bring a landscaper in, you just say, I want you to test my soil and make sure whatever you're designing is going to work. That's all. Because if the pH is really whacked out, or there's really high salts, it's going to affect what you plant. Okay? So that's the key aspect, right? All right. So here's the soils portion. We're going to give you a little bit of Soils 101. Are you ready? All right, I'm glad you're all seated. You would have been, would have knocked you off your feet, this information, right? So technically, topsoil is the top layer, the crust of the soil. It's where everything living stands. We talk about this all the time. I did a lot of work in erosion control work, working with state departments of transportation. If we don't slow down erosion and we blow all that good soil away, we lose all that organic matter. You can't grow food. So you have to protect the soil, and that's what's going to happen there's going to be more and more laws there to protect water usage and protect the soil. Because if we don't do it, we're not going to be able to feed ourselves. Yes, ma'am?
So topsoil,
How deep?
yeah.
Depends on where you are around the country. There is no standard. If you're out like in the mountain states, they're known for having very shallow soil, so it's really hard for them to grow. You can grow a really good lawn and most plants in a foot of soil, okay? Big trees, roots are going to go down tens of feet, much, much lower. Here's the problem. With most landscaping specs, if somebody steals your soil when they build your house, which happens all the time, usually most landscape specs say bring 6 inches of soil back in. And it really just isn't enough. It's the bare minimum. It's the bare minimum. And what's happening now in states like your states and other states that have water issues is they're now requiring more places, or trying to require that you have to bring more soil back in, because if you bring more soil back in, then when you get a big rainstorm, it's much easier to capture the storm water. You hold the water, it perks into the ground, and you recharge the aquifers. So instead of it running off. So there's a real pragmatic reason for this. So what we try to do with the compost is basically trick the environmental system and improve the quality of soil and have it be able to accept more water. Okay? But we really should be having, if you can incorporate stuff into a foot deep, it's great, but most rototillers won't get that deep. Just.
Yes, I'm just confused, so how can you tell?
Me too. I'm confused too. Go ahead.
How can you tell where topsoil ends and what we need to?
It's not going to be easy for you to do that. It's not going to be easy for you to do that on a home. Out in the field, if you're going to go and do a farm field, or if you're going to build homes, they literally get a big old machine and they rip a trench into the ground. And you can actually look at the soil's profile and see how the soil changes, okay? But we can't do that at home. So what ends up happening is, if you know the soil is compact, you're basically forced to get some organic matter into the ground and incorporate it as deep as you can, either with a rototiller or by hand. And it's backbreaking by hand to do that. It really is. No, not too much topsoil. There are places where topsoil is 4 or 5 feet deep, like high quality topsoil. No, there's nothing wrong with a lot of topsoil. But topsoil, the mineral components of it are sand, silt, and clay. These are the little mineral components of it. There's organic matter there, there's nutrients there, there's water there, and then there's living creatures in the soil, right? This is a soil texture, this is a soil triangle that scientists use to confuse each other. But actually, the reason why we do this, it's like a grid system. So anywhere in the world, if you tell somebody there's this percent sand, silt, and clay, a soil scientist will go, oh, okay, well that's a silty clay, or that's a sandy loam. So this is a way for anywhere around the world you can do a soil test, and people can talk about the soil. We test for this because it tells us what we got to do to fix the soil. So in a sandy soil, what do you think compost does in a sandy soil? Holds water, right? In a dense soil, it adds air. So I just want to show you something here. That's sand magnified 45 times, right there, okay? You know what this is over here? This is clay, 19,000 times magnified. So it's like little sheets of paper, clay is. Very, very dense. When it gets dry, it gets like a rock, right? And when it gets wet, it's a swamp, right? And one of the reasons is that in that sandy soil, I can get air through there. I can get air through there to dry it down, but it's very hard to get air in between these little particles. So, what does the soil do? It acts as the growing media for plants, obviously. It's a repository for nutrients and for water. And organic matter is what feeds the soil microbes. So when we add compost in the soil to fix the soil to grow plants, that carbon doesn't go into the plant like a nutrient does. It feeds the microbes, which actually live symbiotically with the plants. So all the soil microbes, they live on plant roots and they help them work better. It's something that we forget about. And that's kind of something that's been dubbed about 15 years ago the soil food web, right? things depend on each other's. You know, if you get these big old beetles and things, and in their larval stage in the ground, they chew up plant roots, right? If you get them, then they're going to be vermin that come in and know they're there and will dig in the ground. So everything depends on each other when it comes to this, and we affect what happens. The interesting thing about it is, my wife will often remind me, we have little dogs, so they like killing little things, and they like digging. And we always know when we have grubs in the soil. We put down this microbe that's actually a pesticide, but it's a microbe, and we kill them. The dogs will go 2 or 3 years, and they don't dig up the backyard. And when they start digging up the backyard, we know we have grubs again. They want to get the grubs and eat the grubs. And then there are critters, voles and things in there that want to eat it. So the point is, it's all related to each other. And the key of it is charging the whole system with carbon. And back in the old days, we used to talk about the carbon cycle. And this carbon cycle is a big, big deal. Who has heard about the Gobi Desert? The Gobi Desert is growing, right? Desertification. That's from loss of carbon. That's from loss of carbon. You could actually reverse that if you got enough carbon in the ground. Okay? So this is what they used to tell us: get a soil that's half air or half mineral and has a lot of air in it and able to hold a lot of water and 5% organic matter. The sad part about this from the textbook is it doesn't exist. It definitely doesn't exist here. You're lucky if you have 1% organic matter in the soil, and you're probably less than a half, probably. So it's just not realistic. So aeration, right? If we get something in there to make more pore spaces, we can get air again back in there, right? So one of the things we do, again, is we're using compost and mulches as a drought management tool. And I joke with the landscapers and people who have to pay to use their water. You guys have to pay to use your water. It's just another way to capture the free water, right? Do it the right way. The plants won't die, but you'll have to spend less water watering, right? All right. Know who you're buying your compost from. These samples we're going to look at later. These come from ZBest, and but make sure that when you buy product, ask them if they can give you one of those test sheets. If somebody's bringing a truck onto our property, because we've done some projects, we'll show you, we're using compost, before they dump it, we look inside to make sure there's nothing nasty in there. You know, we inspect it before they dump it, because once it's dumped, it's being used, you know. Get test data, and remember this, so a compost and mulch is not the same thing, right? Mulch usually has a lot of carbon in it, cellulose carbon, and compost has carbon, but it's more lignin, which is really broken down stuff that stays in the soil for a long time. Okay, they're not typically interchangeable. So that's what compost looks like. You'll see, you get to play with that stuff over there in a few minutes, and there are lots of different flavors of carbon. You know that joke about what they say? Everybody's got opinions. Opinions are like a certain part of your body. Everybody's got one. Everybody know that joke? Well, that's how these people say, what's the best mulch? Everybody's got their own opinion about the mulches they like. It's the craziest thing. Some products that people think are hideous, other people love. I'm from Pennsylvania. Hershey's used to get the shells of chocolate, and they used to sell it as mulch. And it was incredible. It was like, and when it got wet, it had this little pretty sheen on it, and it smelled like chocolate. And there were other people, my wife used to live not far from there, and she said, you know, they used to get public complaints about smelling chocolate. So if you're complaining about the smell of chocolate, you got issues, right? But we say that about pine bark. My wife and I love the smell of pine bark. Some people it nauseates. So it's the craziest thing. People like what it looks like, what it smells like. You never know. We're even making mulches out of coarse compost, and the plants really like it because it brings nutrition and also microbes with it. We're finding the plants grow better with this coarse compost type mulch. Lots and lots of benefits to using the product. The biggest thing here is to add porosity. Look at the roots here. The roots go over the bottom. It's 18 inches deep. turf roots don't even typically do that in the real world, okay? This is by taking subsoil, bad soil, and blending it with compost. Better rooting, more airflow. Actually, the plant roots actually just blow right through these big pore spaces that are created by soil aggregation. So we can take the fine soils around here, we mix compost in there, okay? We already start creating some pore spaces. And when the microbes try to break down the compost, they spit out these glues, biologic glues, and small particles stick together. And that actually helps more long-term pore spaces in the soil. And we know this through research how this all occurs, okay? This is what happens when you get more organic matter in the ground. The technical term is tilth, but the made-up word is workability, which is the word I like because I'm lowbrow, right? And what's the biggest benefit in some of these soils is we hold more water. Here's some clay soil. We added the same amount of water to these two materials, compost to the right, clay soil to the left. You can see to the left, the water is perched. That soil can only take up so much water. We put compost over there, we can hold a lot more, right? So this is some interesting research from Florida. And you see this, it's slightly darker over here. Can everybody tell that? It's a little bit darker. That's actually the grass that wilted. And we were testing when you fix the soil, how much longer can you go without watering? And this is some research we did in Florida before they threw me out of that state. Okay? For big land projects, we look at every 1% of organic matter we increase in the soil over an acre, we can hold an extra 16 to 20,000 gallons of water. So this is why it's really important in big land projects to fix the soil again. If we get to 5% organic matter, which should be the goal, we can hold an extra 100,000 gallons of water per acre. It's a big deal. It's really, really a big deal. Remember this, depending on the type of soil you have, you water differently. You always water. Remember, quick watering is not typically good, especially in this climate. You do a slow, long watering. You want that water to penetrate and not roll off, right? In these dense soils. When you make these soils with a lot of airspace, there's also great research that shows you can capture a whole lot of the storm water. This says 50%, but we can even do more than that. And I'll just show you this one piece of science. We're a little bit behind. I apologize. But I just want to show you this. We did this research in the state, the Department of Ecology I worked with out in Washington State. And I tell you, I worked with the Department of Ecology, so you know I'm not as stupid as I look, right? So that's a joke. You're supposed to be laughing at that. Thank you. Thank you. They're like, you told us where you're from. We know. All right. But we did different compost and different soils. And as you add, this is 10, 20, 30% compost by volume, we look at the soil and watch what happens. But the cool thing that occurs here is we can actually hold more water and percolate more water at the same time. It's because we're creating these pore spaces. So this is beautiful for climate change. We can hold more water because we get more droughts. And when we get a bigger rainstorm than what we used to get, we get to hold more water. It actually collects more water. So we're actually finding communities around the U.S. now, they're going to start, and they have started mandating fixing your soil for stormwater management, because if not, we'll flood the place out. So this, we're going to find this all actually, and it's a really logical way of doing things. So anyway, it's kind of cool. It's going to happen more in the future. Anyway, organic matter, right? Also, compost also carries nutrients. We pasteurize the product, so we kill the bad bugs. We also provide a lot of microbes that actually help the whole system. And some of these microbes actually beat down fungal diseases and things like nematodes. And by the way, I'm way behind, Megan, just so you know. That's my life. I'm always behind. It's because these people ask too many questions, just so you know. She'll yell at me. When you people leave, she's going to yell at me for being being behind. I'm just going to blame it back on you. So just deal with that, right? This is a really cool thing. There are actually certain plant pests that we have better success controlling with compost than we do with any chemical you can buy. It's crazy. Really, really crazy, okay? So this is it. We're going to get compost in the soil, and we're going to improve this sweet spot. where we improve the soil physically, chemically, and biologically, and have more soil health. So when we fix that soil, we have a lot more. There's a lot less stress to the system environmentally when things go wrong, and we can grow a lot more different types of plants by fixing the soil. We can grow a lot more different kinds of plants. Okay? You had a question, ma'am.
Yes, but what we have to do is different from what you're saying. We have clay soil, which absorbs a lot of water.
It does.
So we still add compost, which helps the other effects.
Right. So the reason why we add compost in clay soils is for two reasons. Number one, it's to reduce compaction. We grow better grass, we grow faster plants, we lose less plants by reducing compaction, and then we actually add more airspace in the soil. So you'll actually get more water to absorb in that clay soil, because clay soil holds the most, but then stays wet forever. So if we treat it and we allow air spaces, it will dry down faster. So it'll make the clay soil more workable. Okay? So should we blow through some pictures? Yeah, and then we'll stop and take a break, and then we'll come back. Do you actually have food?
Yeah, it's being prepared.
Okay, so we have food, so you get to eat a little bit of food before you play with the compost. Usually I make people play with compost, not wash their hands, and then eat. But they wouldn't let me do that. They said there's a whole health thing here in California. Whatever. All right. I ate dirt as a kid. Look at me, right? So compost is really a staple of the landscaping industry now. All sorts of cool uses. I like to tell people 2 inches incorporated to 6 or 8 inches, right? That gives you about 20 to 30% inclusion rate of compost. I did some research stuff way back in the day when I wrote this manual called The Field Guide to Compost Use. And with most plants, 20 to 30% incorporation rate is the sweet spot. Adding much more doesn't really benefit you that much. So 20 to 30% sweet spot. So 2 inches incorporated to 6 or 8 inches is going to give you that. Okay? So they're incorporating it in the ground. Key aspect of incorporating compost into the soil is don't over-till it. Little chunks of soil are good. You don't want to break them all down. That's the biggest mistake we do. Okay? And you plant your plants and you water them in, of course, right? Lots of different uses, private, homes. This is actually a dog park over here. So we're growing plants for dogs to pee on. That's great. So, I got my yard for that, whatever. Curb plantings, lots of different plants, but we're going to see more and more urban food being produced. And everywhere where there's urban food being grown, there's usually composting going on, and they use a lot of that, and they grow the plants faster. Check this out over here. These are leaf crops grown in a compost sock that's attached to a wall. You can spray water it, and you can actually pick that stuff off a wall. That's crazy, right? That's probably the future, right? You can use compost for interior landscaping. There's my wife planting a plant, which she's doing every other day, by the way. There's my wife digging a hole, because I don't really want to dig in clay soil. So I took the pictures and I had her dig. Right? So people will sometimes look at me and say, you're not that bright. I'm not that bright, but I'm clever. All right? So, but here, I'll tell you, here's the thing that happens today. We teach people how to plant trees differently today. The soil is so bad that you dig a hole and you can actually drown the plant in the root hole. So now we dig shallower and wider holes. And that's what you're seeing here. You see how part of the root ball is actually above ground? So here I am, I'm blending compost, 1 part compost to 3 parts soil. I'm backfilling, just to let you know I did some of the work, okay? I was tamping it in there, and we put that over the top, and then we mulch, right? That's the perfect way to plant a tree. Good luck getting a landscaper to do that. It takes time. But that's the way you don't lose trees anymore. That's the way you don't lose plants. Here's my wife actually using a pelletized compost, doing the same. She's blending it around the root hole, and she's going to plant the trees back in there again, right? Who's ever heard of sheep mulching, right? Who's had a sheep mulching party? you know, I'm being told about this. I have one of my clients is Stop Waste. They kind of they've really pushed this a lot. Great, right? I'm like, wait a minute. You're telling me you have people invite other people over to fix their lawn. Where I grew up, that's not happening. They throw you out. Now, if I have beer and food, there's difference, right? Okay? But anyway, so what are we doing here? We're getting rid of the lawn. They want to reduce water usage, so they get rid of the lawn, and they're going to plant natives, right? So they put cardboard over the top to smother the weeds, then a layer of compost and a layer of mulch, right? And then we dig through the hole. Then we dig down through the cardboard, and we plant. And by the way, Zbest, on their website, they have a very fantastic and funny video for doing sheet mulching. It's pretty entertaining. So yes, sir.
Any kind of cardboard can be used?
Yeah, I wouldn't use wax-coated cardboard. The paraffin, the cardboard will break down, but very slowly. And the paraffin is not really great stuff. Microbes will break it down, but it takes a long time for them to break it down. So we don't want wax corrugated cardboard, right? And so basically we're reducing, and I'm sure you guys in most of these counties there are deals to be had where people will give you money to do this, right? Here's actually putting in a lawn. This is in my backyard where I only fight with my wife for two things: about my kids, my perfect children. That's a joke, right? And she wants irrigation put in the backyard, and I refuse to put irrigation in. I just don't want to do it. I just don't want to do it. I want to try to do it more natural way. So we're actually getting compost put in the ground here, and I have to tell you, the landscapers we paid to do this, I had to argue with them on how we're going to do this. So I explained to them, okay, so my wife and I went to school for this. Let me tell you what we're doing. They said, well, we're going to put down soil amendment. You know what they were going to put down? 10 bags of fine pine fines. And they were going to incorporate. I'm putting down like 3 inches of compost, and we're ripping it down almost a foot. And we have a couple magnificent pine trees that suck all the water out of there. So we're building up a reservoir to hold more water, and we get stormwater that runs through our yard and floods our yard out. So we're trying to manage the stormwater in our backyard too. So that's what we're doing. Here they are. They have it laid out, raking it. He's incorporating it in. They're rolling it actually to tamp it down a little bit. Oh, I just went too fast. Now they're sodding it and they're watering it, and you know it worked out really well. On the side of our house, we actually did it ourselves. That's how we realized we didn't want to do the backyard, by the way. Yeah. I said, the hell with this. All right? This is way more effort than I want to put into this. Okay? The whole garden thing is great. All right? But, so, there's my wife incorporating it in with the really little mini rototillers. And we seeded, and we're covering up with hay, or straw, I should say. And we had a beautiful stand there. And water would rush through there in storms. So we're trying to collect that water, right? They do this for big projects, both clay soils and sandy soils. We know how to use compost to grow native plants now. Caltrans has funded a lot of really cool research from UC Riverside and other universities here in the state. And top dressing. Here's something you can do in your own yards if you want to keep your turf, but you want to reduce watering. Has anybody seen these aerators that pull the plugs out of the ground? Right? Like this. It's not a piece of poop. That's a plug, right? And if you can get your soil moist, you can probably go down about 3 inches. You pull these plugs, they top dress with 1/4 to 1/2 inch of compost, and that's what you can get done. Right? There's actually there's another picture of another yard right near me doing that. But there's a really cool machine that lawn companies could actually buy now. That actually is a motorized. It's got like a lawnmower engine that spreads compost really well. So now there's a kind of an economic way to actually spread this stuff, because let me just tell you, doing that by hand ain't cool at all. It is, but it's motorized and it's belt driven, So, because compost, good compost, when you buy it, typically has 40 to 50% moisture, so it won't go through a typical spreader. So by motorizing it, we can actually spread it uniformly, and it works beautifully. Or you can get, I don't know if you've ever seen one of these giant trucks, and they can actually blow compost, which you'll see this on roadsides sometimes. It's crazy. We do it for erosion control. And we've been doing ball fields for 30 years this way as a maintenance practice to make ball fields softer for the kids to play on. We manufacture soil on site for big projects. That was the old soil, no compost with compost. So we could take literally dead soil and grow stuff in it by getting compost back in the soil. More important to you all, if you want to bring soil on your project, people make these soils. They get local soil and they blend it with compost and other things, and you can actually buy soils from a lot of these landscape yards now that have compost in it. So you can buy a soil with 30% compost in it already if you just want to build up on top of it, right? All different scales they do this, right? And then finishing up here, mulching. We mulch for a lot of different reasons, right? Again, my wife mulching, not me, right? Right? Again, I'm slow, I'm not stupid. All right. Now look at this picture right here. This is somebody mulching in Florida. I threw them in one of the wood chippers because they angered me so much about this. What are they doing wrong here with that mulching job? You never mulch against the trunk of a tree. You have a transmission of pests and water and vermin. And I'll show you what happens sometimes when things go really bad. Okay? But we mulch for a lot of different reasons. The sun hits the ground, right? Here's our mulch. When the ground isn't covered, there's water in the ground, the radiant energy hits that ground, and the water just evaporates, right? The best usage of water is having it leave the site through a plant. Plant leaves have pores just like we do. There's water movement through a plant. So if you mulch, you basically absorb the radiant heat and actually lowers the temperature of the soil for the plant roots, which is really beneficial for the plant roots, and there's a physical barrier there that stops water from evaporating away. All right? Now the key part of this is, though, when you mulch, you either put, if you have irrigation system, you put it under the mulch. If you put it on top of the mulch, you have to do a slow watering so all the water doesn't stay in the mulch, it gets into the soil. You have to do a slow, deep watering. Very infrequent, okay? But there's a lot of really cool things happen here for mulching. It's a beautiful system. Great research showing you can reduce irrigation up to 70%, right? That's pretty cool. Again, lots of different types of products out there, even compost. Typically, I want to tell you something else, 3 inches of mulch. Some people will put more than that. It's overkill. 3 inches of mulch. Then every few years, you rake your mulch out and you put new mulch in, or you rake it around and you move the soil a little bit, and then you put the stuff back in there again to make sure there's no, sometimes in clay soils you can get a slimy barrier, which reduces oxygen movement to the plants. It's crazy.
Hay? Did you say that you were using hay? Is that the mulch?
I used some straw. That was just for putting on top of the seed. Just to Nope. No. I wouldn't use it as mulch. Matter of fact, we use pine straw in North Carolina as mulch. Man, I hate that stuff with a passion. I get yelled at by people down there, but I hate it. So there it is. There's lots of different choices, though. You go to a landscape yard or a garden center, you're going to have a choice of 5, 6 different products. Who's the guy right across around the block from here that carries a bunch of these different products? Tri-City Rock. So but you're going to probably go there. Probably going to have 5 or 6 different mulches to choose from, you know. But anyway, I like to show this. This is stones being used as mulch. Hate it. Hate it, hate it, hate it. Why do we do that? Because I don't ever want to mulch again. That's why people do it. The problem is the ground underneath that is actually hotter. It's actually harder for the plants. Okay? The other thing is there's no organic matter. There's no water holding capacity. And if you grew up where I grew up in Philly, we used to have people who did this around their house. You know what we used to do? We had rock fights. So that mulch became a weapon for me to hit somebody else in the head with. Okay? So I'm anti-rock mulch for a lot of different reasons. Also really heavy to move around. And this is straw, pine straw, which is also nasty stuff, but some people like it. So this is the worst case scenario, one of these mulch volcanoes. That actually really happened, that the disease caused a ring around the tree, and that actually got pushed over in a windstorm. And it was weakened by that poor practice. It's crazy. You almost never see it that bad. But somebody showed me this. I said, you got to be kidding me. And this is actually a project that they worked on. They went back and fixed the yard afterwards. It's crazy. What I do with old mulch is it sometimes would go in my compost bin, compost it as the coarse fraction. But what I typically do is I put the new mulch. I will sometimes rake it back in and then put new mulch on top. What I want to do is move it out there, move it out a little bit, and just rake along the soil surface to make sure there's no layer, and then I could put stuff back in again. But some people will just remove it. But it's going to degrade. There'll be less and less of it, right, as you go, the longer you wait. So let me finish up here so I don't get yelled at. But I just want to show you something here. So here's stones. I don't like stones. Remember I told you? You Californians all get stoned. Well, that's a whole other story, you know. But so here's stones, right? And here's mulch, bark mulch. So why do you think we have stones here in this landscape job, though? Nope. Oh, who said that? It doesn't hold water, but I'll tell you what it does. So there's a higher slope over here, and the water is going to come off that slope and hit the stone first. And it's going to slow the velocity of the water and let it, slows erosion. And then it perks into the mulch will then capture it. If that mulch layer was not there, the movement of that water maybe would push the mulch away. So we do this in bioretention ponds too, where the inlets are to bring water in, and it's all basically a natural system, like a rock bed, right? Just our little bioengineering. I just want to make a point. It does make a difference what mulch you buy. If you like the way rock mulch looks, first seek help, okay? I don't like it, so seek help, okay? But number two, if you're trying to hold water, we know a lot of these composted mulch hold the most water. The bark mulches come after that. So if you're trying to hold water, the choice you make does matter. So you always think about, why am I using the mulch? Am I strictly using it because it looks the way I want? That's fine, you know. But some of the mulches, the composted mulches especially, hold a lot more water. Okay?
Where can you get a recipe for mulches? How to, like a recipe to make?
Well, how to find one?
Yeah. Where do you get, like, on the internet?
Oh yeah. Well, there's a website I have at the very end of this, so you can actually find mulch sources around here, okay? But I just want to make a point, just to finish up real quick here. There are some really cool things they do with coarse compost now, little bioengineering. This is one of those giant trucks. We're blowing coarse compost. When they're blowing this stuff dry, seed is being injected into it. And they blow it on a slope, doing this all over the world now, and the seed just germinates and jumps out of the ground for erosion control. I wrote the national standards for this. This is being used everywhere now. So what really happens is it acts like this compost works like a forest floor, which is very resilient to erosion, right? They put compost in women's pantyhose. Not really, but it's a breathable sock. It's a breathable sock, and they use this to capture sediment behind on construction sites. And it acts as a 3D filter and captures all the fine soil particles, and you use that to protect water, like a stream.
Them around the sewers here.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Right? And then here's a cool thing. I just want to show you something, because we're getting more creative with this stuff. This is a compost berm. This is a Caltrans product. They're using it to stop erosion. Over here, they're using it on the roadside to slow down and capture water coming off the slope so it doesn't come across the highway real fast. They plant on top of it with wildflowers, and you never see it. it's just pretty cool stuff that you can do in your own backyard. Do some creative things without building walls and spending a lot of money. Just thinking about a natural system, and we're going back to these systems now. Rooftops, you see more and more stormwater ponds, rain gardens. Compost is in all the rain garden mixes. And I worked with some of the guys from Zanker's eBest actually this past year. We did some field research on creating mulches that don't float as much, where you have a lot of water, and they're looking for bioretention mulches that don't float as much. And after this break, I'll show you that. I'll show you that mulch, okay? 35 years, this is my life, right? So, but I'll pass this around. Okay, you got that. Okay. Now, if you, he knows. Now, I want to make a point. This is one of the composts they make. Okay. So here's the yard trimmings to manage the food waste. The food waste adds a lot of extra nitrogen, and they have to compost that in a different way. And one of the things they do with that material is they'll add a carbon source later on, and it'll help bind up a lot of the extra nutrients to keep it in the product. Okay. But here's a cow manure product. Feel this one right over here.
Oh, heavy.
Right. So lots of times animal manure products are less refined. Lots of times they're less refined. Sometimes they're wet because they're composting them in the field. Sometimes now they have more nutrients, right, than the green waste compost do. Really good. A lot of people use them for. A lot of people use it in produce gardens and things like that because it has a lot of nutrients. But lots of times the weight has to do with the fact that they're composting it in the field and they pick up a lot of soil. So it just makes the compost denser. So the yard trimmings compost sometimes are on harder surfaces and they doesn't pick up as much soil. Right? Right? So you're not loving that, are you? It's okay, thank you. All right. It's not just me. Every once in a while, yeah, so, okay. But the ingredients are what affect this. So the interesting thing about this, I pick up an ammonia scent, okay? And what these guys do with this product is they mix it with the woody material and make specialized products out of it, so whatever they do with it is efficacious, so it works in the field, okay? But you take that material and you mix it with topsoil, and it's going to do all right. You know, it's going to do okay. But different uses. Now, I'm going to show you something here. This is, which one is this one? So this is, you have some more soils. Are there more soils over here?
There's a bunch more.
Okay, let's leave the mulches over there. Could you grab me those two soils? Yeah, those two. Okay, yeah. Okay, so here's a good example. Remember we showed you the stuff that they're blowing on the surface for erosion control. That's like this material right here. It's basically compost with extra stringy wood left in it. And what that does is when they blow it on the roadside, the fine material is heavier actually, and it percolates down, and the coarser material actually has a lower bulk density, and in the wind and rain it actually comes to the surface. And it creates like a little mat, almost like a forest floor. So when the rain hits it, it dissipates the energy, and the water just perks right into the finer material. But this combination material, that kind of stuff also, a coarser version of that is what goes in those socks. Okay? And it creates a matrix that the soil gets caught as it's going through there. Okay. So, the interesting thing, where let's see, is there a cup? I just wanted to show you something here really fast. I'm going to make a mess actually is what I'm going to do.
A cup?
I wanted a little cup, but that's okay.
They have some cups out there.
But I just want to show you something here. Back in the old days, we used to have people who sold topsoil. And they'd say, we have great topsoil, but they'd buy the compost, right? And I'd say, well, okay. I'd say, well, why are you buying the compost? Now look at this. Because it's easier to sell a soil with that color. Oh, stop it. Come on now. Don't be like that. Don't be like that, right? So, but that's a thing. That's a thing. So it's visual, right? But, see, that's one of the things that they do. So they make these pre-made mixes, and they have different flavors of So there's the landscape compost. This is actually the... Was that the stuff that was in the bag?
Yep.
Oh, yes. It smells like there was a cow sitting on there. All right, no, that's a bad joke. All right. All right.
So what
You
do
can take the boy out of Philly, but you can't take Philly out of the boy? Yeah, you go ahead, please.
What if we just wanted to do a vegetable
Mm-hmm.
garden? What's the recommended soil?
Right. Okay, so different choices, right? So you have, let's say you have a garden bed and you say, well, I don't want to bring in 6 inches of a pre-made
Yes.
soil, right? You could sit there and say, the soil's really bad. Sometimes people just bring 6 inches of that. Sometimes they'll put boards up and they'll make a planting, right? A raised bed. And that way, the water will perk through that before it hits the bad soil. The other option, of course, is to put 2 or 3 inches of one of these composts in and just incorporate it into the ground. It really depends on the work effort you're going to do. You know, what kind of work you want to do. So you can do either one. You can do either one, but depending on your use, like for instance, the landscape compost that I smell a little ammonia in, so that product right there, in many ways, would be better for a produce because it has a lot more nutrients in it. So I'm going to think about what am I growing, and where am I going to get the most help? Well, this will be mixed with a little wood. You didn't bring one of those mixes, did you? This one right here. So this one has landscapes.
I have the other one, but it'll be the same.
But just pass it around. Smell how good that blended soil. So there's sand and there's compost.
Sand, compost, and topsoil.
Okay. So the cool part about that is a lot of landscapers even don't want to take compost and incorporate it in the ground because it's slower than just putting new soil on top. It makes me crazy a little bit, but that's a beautiful product right there that you could put in a planter or you can put in a raised bed. And frankly, you don't even have to put it in a box. You make a plateau on the ground and you step on it and densify it a little bit, right? And then you just can plant and do what you have to do with it, right? But the beauty is that soil that's being passed around, that's where it started. And this is a sandy loam, and this is a base soil for a lot of different mixes in the area. But still, it's heavy. It's heavy, and it's getting that organic matter in there is going to really.
You said if you were doing natives, which one would you use?
If I was doing natives, I would actually, I would either do a yard waste compost, a very mature yard waste compost, and if you wanted, you could even use the one with the wood bits in it. And by putting those wood bits in the ground, it kind of sucks, the microbes will try to break down this carbon, and they suck nitrogen out of the soil. So since the natives don't like a lot of nitrogen, you can try to starve them. But what we found out was, if you're going to do natives, the easiest thing to find is good yard trimmings compost. Not a lot of food in it, not manure, not biosolids. It's low nutrient stuff. The plants don't need a lot of nutrients. People, for years, they used to tell us, many little gardening books still say, you don't ever fix the soil when you plant natives. Yeah, and most of the natives die. No kidding. I mean, back east, here with the natives die. Back east, it used to be wildflowers. We had massive wildflower programs. They're natives. And they die. They're so hard to establish. So the point is, even if that compost mineralizes in the soil, and most of it turns into CO2 in years, it will have held the soil and improved the soil long enough for that plant to get a foothold. And then it's going to do okay. Then the native will be okay after that once it gets established. Yes, ma'am.
So Ron, a lot of the stuff that I've seen that you're passing around is the best stuff.
Yeah.
But here locally, what is the equivalent and where are we finding it?
Yeah.
Okay, are you familiar with Linkso?
Yeah. Yeah, Linkso sells, but like most of the big composters sell through, so these guys wouldn't sell product to you. But there's a facility right around the corner, a landscape material.
Tri-City Rock.
Yeah.
And so are the natives
similar to what we're seeing that you're passing around?
They should be. They should be. So when you go into one of these landscape yards and you look at a compost, the first thing I would do is say, is this compost from the STA program? And have them give you one of those sheets. Remember that sheet that it showed? Have them show you that sheet. So that way you know it was certified and it's gone through some rigor. And then you know what you're buying that way. And then on that sheet, it'll give the name of the composter who made it. So you'll know who get. But all the biggest composters in the state are in the national program. So you should not have a problem with getting stuff through a landscape yard and being told where they got it from.
It's just that locally, I think the big box stores are more prevalent to us.
Yep.
And so then we have to search out these things, and when we're searching them out, there's nothing uniform.
Right.
That's telling us that we're getting what you're recommending.
Right. So here's part of our problem. And if you go on the U.S. Composting Council's website, they have a lot of good information on where you can buy bulk compost. Part of our problem is we buy a lot of this stuff in bags. You can't see it before you buy it. So I've been really promoting that if you have a decent amount of work to be done, you can get a cubic yard now. You can have somebody get you that and some mulch to do your landscaping projects, and don't buy 20 bags. It'll be cheaper, but you also get to see what you buy. That's the beauty of going to one of those stone shops. You can actually walk around and say, and pick the stuff up and say, I don't like that, but I like that.
But then we have to be the ones to mix it in, right? They won't do that for you, right?
Well, a lot of those kind of places have landscapers that work with them, that they could probably give you cards for people who do the work. But it just depends on what you want to do. I mean, you know, you saw at our house, we had them taken care of. We had some lawn work done. Nobody plants the trees in our place. We do all of the gardens and all the planting because that's what we like to do. But we also have this frighteningly dense soil, even worse than yours. You know, ours, they used to make, the natives made pots out of it, and more recently they make bricks out of our soil. So that's where we live. It's even worse soil. So, but we can fix it. But we can fix it. And I just want to show you something here. So here's a premium planter. There's a premium planter. That's a really pretty one. And this is one that we would use in one of those bioretention mixes. So we would create a swale with the rocks, and water would funnel in here to help capture water, then perk it through. This is happening all over the state now, and this is a mixture of compost and different types of gravels and sands. And this does an incredible job. And the whole idea here is for this to capture the water and release it slowly for it to be able to be absorbed, but also be able to grow a plant. Because if you keep the plants alive in here, the whole bioretention pond actually works better. The roots actually create pore space, so that they actually function better. So in some of the specs for these things, when the engineers get too involved with them, is there anybody here an engineer? I'll make sure I don't want to pick on engineers too much. Sorry, you guys screw up a lot of things. All right, no, but the funny part about it is that we're going from like a physical system to something that part of the way we keep it working is by having something living in there. So it adds something into that system that's a little bit tougher. So the point is, if we keep the plants alive in this, that whole system actually works better out in the field. It's really kind of cool.
Mother Nature is doing their job.
And that's really what it is. And what we're really doing is we're recreating wetlands, little baby wetlands is what we're doing. Do you have a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
In a sheet mulching, it says we add a little bit of compost on top of the cardboard, then mulch.
Right.
But I read we can eliminate the compost and just apply mulch on top of the cardboard. Is that correct? Or is
that is something I would expect people in Russia to say, not people in America. No, you have to use the compost. So let me just tell you why we put the compost on there. There's a lot of different things that are happening. But when you cut through, you're going to actually, you're going to pick out where you're going to plant. So you're going to pull the mulch and compost away, and you're going to dig a hole. You're going to slice a hole, and then you're going to bring up that soil, and you're going to mix that compost and mulch back into it, and it falls back in the hole with the plant. So basically, we're using the compost and a little bit of the mulch to basically amend the soil, to help the plant get a start. So if it's all woody stuff, it's not going to be as good for the plant. Yeah, you probably won't have as much microbial activity. The compost is going to be a much better food for the soil microbes. Yeah. So, all right, now, I just want to show you something over here with these mulches. We want to pass the mulches over here? You know, God forbid I walk 3 places, you know? I have a bum hip. I can't walk that far. All right. So I just want to show you something. This material, crazy looking material right here, is we tested this material, and these 2 kind of materials actually work the best in one of those bioretention ponds. They don't float as much. We found that mulches that are a little denser and stringier actually do better when the floods come in, right? Some of the pure wood mulches, they act like little rafts, and they float away. All right. And then when somebody says, "I have a non-floating mulch," you know, back in the old days we used to say you throw the BS flag at somebody. So if it's made out of wood, it's supposed to float. We want something that floats the least. When we say non-floating, we really mean that it's just not going to, blow its way out of there. But here's the thing: you can also see different colors, right? Different color mulches. Some of them are made out of pure bark. I didn't bring any of them. But you can get different colors and different sizes based on what you like. Now, that coarser stuff's going to last on the ground longer, right? It's going to degrade less. But some people are going to say, yeah, but I like that look better, right? So it just depends on what you're looking for. That will also hold more water. Because the fact it's a little finer, less water will perk dramatically and it'll hold. Yes, ma'am?
So the difference in color, have they been colored with different?
These have been colored by watercolor dyes. So these are all safe dyes.
So when we're at a facility looking, how do we know what to look for?
Right. So if you want to know if it's a dyed mulch or not, so the look of the wood is very apparent, and it looks nothing like bark. Like you'll see cedar bark here or redwood bark, right? That crazy gorilla hair stuff, which goes on fire, which it's very flammable. By the way, that was the other thing I wanted to mention to you. Some of the composted mulches, there was a study done University of Nevada and one done in California, the least flammable mulches. So it's this crazy material. People say, well, I'm not sure it's as pretty as some of the other mulches. Yeah, okay. And I have data that shows that the plants grow 40% bigger because there's something going on there with microbes, and it's not flammable.
Is that one particular one?
Well, these ones made out of that were pre-composted, a lot with the yard trimmings in it. They're very unique. They have some fine particles left in the mulch, which makes them hold a lot more water. And of course, if you do that, then the microbes are there. And then some of that woody material, some of that compost actually has nutrients that's bringing along with it. This pure wood stuff won't have any nutrients at all. Right? So there's a lot of there's so many choices, but lots of times it comes down to look, what people like. But I always try to tell people, think functionality. Think functionality if you can, Now, I could say that right away and say, well, I'm going to use this most functional mulch. And if my wife says to me, yeah, we're not using that mulch, I guess I'm not using that mulch. All right? I get it. I get that, right? But I'll make a point. What some people will do, they used to do this back in the old days, where back east they would say you have to buy this very specific mulch. They would go and they'd put a couple inches of a composted mulch down and put the other mulch on top, because they knew this mulch was probably better for the plants, but then the people who owned the site had a specific look they were looking for, they just put that on top. So it's kind of a way, it's a little complicated, but it's functional. You can do it. And these guys who bring these materials into you, they can, in the same truck, they can bring you 3 different materials if you really want. So, yes ma'am.
The big bark that you buy in the bag.
Yep.
If you put those in I have roses and they get like
Yeah.
that mold stuff.
Yep.
Does that get into the bark and is that bad?
Yeah, it's probably that mold. It could be different things, but a lot of the carbon products in general, fungi go after them for food.
So carbon means that's the ones like.
Well, all these things are, but
Anything that's wood?
yes, the woodier ones, and certain barks aren't, don't attract as much, and other ones do. And frankly, lots of times, it doesn't happen unless you have a wet year. You know, so there's so many factors that go into this. But there used to be something years ago that was this yellow mold we were getting. It was actually a fungi back east that we found. It went all over the East Coast, and it came and it went. But it was this disgusting stuff. Its nickname was dog vomit. It was a yellow, really disgusting-looking fungus. Do you really? And there's other ones, by the way, that have little spores, and they spit spores onto your house. And sometimes they have ones that have spit like stained siding from the spores. So there's, you know, it's kind of funny. We talk about all these things with composting and composting better. The one thing we know is doing that composting system, there are microbes in there that are trying to repopulate, right? So they're trying to live. All these things are just trying to live. They're in our hair sometimes, right? You know, sometimes for better or worse. But any other questions about these? Yes, sir.
Actually, what's the difference between these mulches and just like regular wood chips that you put in a chipper after people chopping down trees?
Right. Well, okay. So for these, what's that? Well, the biggest difference is all of these materials, like this one would not have been composted, would it?
No. That's natural tree trim.
Right. So the biggest thing about the mulches that have, even the bark mulches that were piled, they typically will have gone through a thermophilic stage where they heat them so they're never carrying any weed seeds or pathogens, plant pathogens. Now some of these woody materials that are made out of pure wood, not really very good carriers. You're never going to really get weeds out of this. But you could have a fungal disease on it, but it's very unlikely because there's not really good enough food for them to eat on that stuff. Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions. One is
Well, you only get one. Unless you have a few bucks.
That's all right.
Okay, go ahead.
You can have my...
There you go. Good answer.
Okay.
Another man outsmarted. Yes, go ahead.
So
Yeah.
most of the time, okay, people choose like these black or mahogany,
Mhm.
or just the fir bark based on look.
Absolutely.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. In many cases, that's really what it is. Now, I will say, one of the reasons why these kind of mulches have gotten popular is the mulches made out of real bark have just gotten incredibly expensive. Where I live in North Carolina, we have a massive forestry industry. So they're always replanting pines, and they're always cutting them down. So we have a massive supply of pine. But we don't want people knocking down redwood trees out here, right? Up north, it's fir bark that comes down sometimes from the northwest. So part of the deal is these products made out of recycled materials have changed the economics. They're less expensive. That's part of the deal.
Passing around a survey. This will
Yep.
be your raffle ticket to win some of the booklets. We can keep answering questions and stuff, but please put your name, or if you want to keep it anonymous, put something that you'll know is you if it's false.
Don't put my name down. That's not funny.
So
Yes.
The second question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So my landscaper once told me that these actually they add preservatives to it. So it's not good. Is that true?
No.
Okay.
No. And that is part of the problem. Part of the problem is there are so many products. I even joke that, the extension service guys who work for the university, every once in a while we have to duct tape them to a chair and show them new products, so they're not talking about things that you can't even buy anymore. So that was probably like a rumor somebody said who was selling against one of the other products. But they even changed the dyes they use in these now. I mean, I don't want to say you can drink them, but they're totally non-toxic. Yeah.
So Ron,
Yes, ma'am.
quick question. In this
Yep.
area, I know I've had my experience when you hire someone to do work for you, like there are a lot of gardeners, they're not certified.
Right.
What's best practices for trying to work with them? Because I had the same experience when I redid my yard. I wanted roses to line my fence, and the gentleman had quoted me something thinking he was going to provide plant material, and I'm like, no, that's not what we talked about.
Right.
So what is your suggestion for being.
Do you own a gun? I know this is this is California. In my state, it's really easy. Somebody's packing.
By surrogate, I have probably about 12. My son is retired.
Well, there you go. So you know what? So when we had people do our yard, we tried to sit down and explain. I said to them, well, how do you go and fix a yard? And they told me. And I said, okay, so here's what we want to do. We don't want any of your fertilization. Just keep it. We don't want lime. We use lime back used to change pH. And I said, I'm going to bring in compost. You're going to quote me to spread it and incorporate it and then seed, or in this case, sod. So I basically gave them less parameters to bid on. And I said, I can get the compost. I know what that's going to cost me. Just like you, if you wanted to, you could buy the plants. Because one of the things that happens in big projects is they tell you they're going to give you plants like this, and they give you plants like that. And there's really no great way without, you're going to get in an arguing match over it. I can imagine, right? So, one of the things you do is you buy your own materials. But here's the bad thing: unless you're there babysitting them, you don't know if they're planting the best way. And I think it is better to sometimes pay people who are. A lot of the state landscaping organizations now have people who didn't go to college, but they have training courses and they're certified. And in many cases, it probably makes sense to pay a little bit more and get those people, or if not, you're going to be babysitting, sadly. So if you don't have a gun, you get a whip. That's your other chance. Walk around with a big stick.
I just kind of floated in and out of the project, and it was like, no, we're doing it this way, we're doing this way.
You always get the cell phone number of the owner of the company, too, of the manager. See if somebody to yell at. Yes, sir.
Any more fertilizer if you use the raised bed garden?
Great question. So, what are you going to do? You're going to grow vegetables?
Yes.
Okay. So, if you use like one of these green waste composts, you could put a slow-release nutrient package with it, but you're going to have to probably fertilize 3-4 weeks into it. I mean, all the plants we grow, turf requires a lot of nutrients, and then vegetables and fruit that we grow, a lot. I mean, you could take a tomato plant, and based on how much nitrogen you throw on it, you're going to get more and more tomatoes. So you do. This is never going to be a replacement. But here's the thing. It does provide some nutrition, and there's something that goes along with compost called cation exchange capacity. And all that really is little negative charges, and when you throw nutrients into the ground, they're positively charged, and they hold on to the organic matter. So when you use nutrients, they'll stay around longer. So that's one of the benefits of having organic matter in the ground too. But you're going to have to fertilize again. And I would just use slow-release nutrients, organic stuff.
But you're going to create a lot of earthworms, right, by putting those things?
You can get earthworms. Yeah, but earthworms are good in most cases. I mean, they're the critters that actually make soil. They tunnel. They do. I mean, vermicast. Did everybody see the worm castings? I mean, my gosh, some people, the cannabis growers in the state, some of them pay $500 to $1,000 a ton, a yard.
The other thing
for worm. What?
Yeah. Worms in, and I placed worms before I planted them myself. Okay. Because they fertilize 24/7.
They do. They do. Yeah.
Get.
Do you know when they look at a soil? If you analyze a soil, they look at the population of microbes and the different species and worm population. And if you have high populations of microbes and lots of species and lots of worms, you kind of have the best growing soil. And when they reduce numbers, something's always going wrong in the soil. They're either over-tilling it or they're putting too many petroleum-based chemicals in the soil, and you just nuke them, the life. And this is the thing that we never talk enough about, is that the microbes work with the plants to do what they want to do. We want to keep the worms and the microbes alive. So we're feeding them the carbon. Yes, ma'am.
As far as fertilizer, I was using that Osmocote. Is that bad?
Why? How? Well, I know the man who invented it. So I would, and I'm not that old, but one of my professors, and it's a great product, but it's totally chemically based. So if you don't want to use the product called Osmocote, it's an incredible product that they use in the nursery industry forever because it could, like, they make some that last 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So the way it's made, it's very slow release, yeah. But it's chemically based, so you make the choice: do I want to use something that's chemically based or not? And it depends on, as long as you don't overuse them, as long as you're not near water, you're probably not going to have a lot of problems.
I'm not using it with tomatoes, and I don't really want to be eating them if it's bad.
No, it's not. I don't think. First of all, so let me just tell you something about bad stuff. People say, well, are there chemicals in here that are going to get in my food? So tomatoes, are they actually truly a vegetable? They're a fruit. Fruiting bodies, reproductive bodies, don't accumulate heavy metals. So even if you have lots of heavy metals in your soil, the leaf crops are more likely to take them up than the fruit crops are. But we actually found by adding compost, we can actually bind up heavy metals and stop them from getting in the plants. They do projects all over the world where there's contaminated land and they treat it with compost and sludge.
Plants and harvesting the nickel from the plants. So
that's phytoremediation. That's right. They can do that to remove. There's some really fascinating things.
Money for the nickel.
Oh, there you go. But I will say this. That's crazy. I will say this. So remember that if you read stuff on the internet that sounds a little crazy, it probably is. Okay? I told my kids who are 28 and 26, the internet is the greatest educational tool ever created, and there's so many lunkheads that are also writing things on there. And I suggested that I will volunteer to be the nation's etiquette police. So I said to my kids, there's a lot of stupidity on the internet. They go, well, how do you fix it? It's free speech. I said, you hire me. And I will tell you what's stupidity, and we'll get it off, and I'll let you know what should stay on there, okay? I can do that for you. So please, here comes the raffle results. Thank you, everybody, for all the questions.